Hello, inclusive leaders. Welcome to Lead at Any Level Live. I am so excited to be with you today. If you're joining me live, I don't know what's with this green, guys. Come on. Um, don't know why. It's only on StreamYard. It's never on Zoom, just on StreamYard. I get this weird green halo in front of my green screen. So anyway, welcome. And let me know in the comments or in the chat, wherever you are, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. Let me know where you're joining from, and be sure to put hashtag live in your comment so I can speak to you right now and find out what's going on. If you're watching the replay, let me know where you're watching from and put hashtag replay in your comments, because I would love to know kind of who's catching this live and who's watching on the replay. And I'm trying to figure out kind of where my best engagement is so I can give you all what you need and what you want, when you need it, where you want it, all of that good stuff. So again, let me know in the chat where you're coming from, hashtag live or hashtag replay. So today there was some interesting news. I heard last week that we are back to record low unemployment. The unemployment rate across the US broadly is 3.4%. That's a 54-year low, I believe. And I heard that unemployment for Black Americans is under 5% for the first time, I think, since they've been recording that number. It was down around 4%, 4.7% last week. So historic low unemployment for Black folks in the US, which is pretty significant. Typically, the unemployment numbers among Black Americans is about double the rate for Americans overall, or for white Americans specifically. And so it's really interesting to me and very encouraging that that unemployment gap is being closed. So that's the good news. The bad news, well, that's the good news for workers. I guess for employers, that could be bad news because it means it's harder to find and retain your employees when unemployment is low. And if you're experiencing that, let me know in the chat. I would love to hear from you about what you think is behind that in your workplace. But the other news out today, it comes from, I think, Fortune magazine. And let me check that real quick. I want to check my source on that. Fortune magazine, yes. So Fortune magazine reports that we are at a 75-year low for worker productivity. And I think that's coming from two places. I think it's coming from, number one, just the extreme collective exhaustion and burnout that we've all been experiencing because of pandemic and near post-pandemic life for many people. But there's also, there's still a lot of illness going around. So don't get lulled into a false sense of security around COVID. It's still out there. It's still wreaking havoc, along with, flu, seasonal allergies, and a whole bunch of other things that are happening. RSV, I hear, is ticking up as well. So there's lots of illness to be had if you're out in the world. But the other thing that I think is probably behind some of these productivity numbers is that wages have been rising, often to keep pace with inflation, which has been higher than normal in the last couple of years. Now, all of that to say, I don't think people are actually working less necessarily than they have been. I just think the work for wage ratio is probably a little off kilter, but I need to dive into this more to really understand it and read, some more economic reports. But what I wanted to talk to you today about is how you can combat these lower productivity numbers in your workplace, because we want to make sure, as leaders and as inclusive leaders, that our workers are productive, so that we are, getting the most bang for our buck in terms of our salaries and compensation and wages, because that's often the largest expense we have as employers. But before I get there, I want to be clear about something, and that is that we're seeing a very lopsided slowdown in recovery, depending on where you think we are in this economic cycle. And that is to say that there is a disparate impact when there's an economic slowdown. And the disparate impact comes in three places. It comes in terms of who's affected by layoffs, where budgets get cut, and who's most likely to get hired. So let me talk about that real quick. The first piece is who gets laid off. Typically, layoffs disproportionately affect underrepresented, historically exploited workers. So Black and brown workers, women, in particular. And what that means is when layoffs happen, you are going to see more fear and more more disparities, more unfair disparities in terms of the impacts around those layoffs. So that's the first thing to watch for if you're really committed to leading inclusively. The second thing to watch for is, where does your budget get cut? If the first thing your organization does when there's a slowdown or an expected slowdown, I am not going to use the economic R word because I think it's self-fulfilling. If we say it, it happens. But when you notice that there's a slowdown, what's the first thing your organization cuts? If the first two places they make cuts are the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, or the DEI office, and training and development, if those are the first two cuts that get made whenever there's a slowdown, um, that's an equity problem. That is an inclusion problem for your organization. And the reason for that is because folks are watching constantly people who have been historically excluded from promotional consideration, from leadership roles, from conversations about upward mobility, historically excluded from upward mobility itself. They are watching all the time. How are you responding when it's tough, right? In tough times, how is your organization responding to its DEI initiatives? Are you really committed, or are you only committed when times are good? That's number one. The second thing is, there's a learning and development piece that needs to happen in order for you to get your entire staff, your entire organization up to speed in your company, to make sure that everybody is upskilling for the future of their workplace, to make sure that you are engaging and retaining your employees, to make sure that people are leading in the way that you want them to lead. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing is who gets hired. Because typically when companies are experiencing a slowdown, the hiring becomes a little bit more narrow, a little more risk averse. We stop doing the extra things that we need to do to make sure that we get a diverse slate of candidates in the door. We stop giving people the benefit of the doubt. We start relying on our old patterns in order to fill open positions. And typically that's where bias creeps in. So if you're not paying attention to, number one, who's getting laid off, number two, what's happening to your DEI and training and development budgets, and number three, who are you most likely to hire in an economic downturn, chances are you are dropping the ball on your commitment to diversity and inclusion. So I want to be very clear about that. Now, if we're talking about worker productivity, which is actually the focus of today, I want to talk about 5 reasons why you need to focus on engagement and not beating people while they're down, not trying to force people to work harder, not trying to force them back to the office arbitrarily. That's not your problem. Your problem is most likely employee engagement. So let's talk just a little bit about employee engagement and how employee engagement and productivity are correlated. I'm not necessarily saying causation, although I do think that there probably is some there. But let's talk about this from an employee perspective. So if your employees are more motivated, right? If you can motivate your employees better, and this gets to knowing what they want and how they work and why they're there in the first place. That mission alignment is critical and how their jobs matter. Engaged employees are more motivated to perform their best. They want to be successful. They want to move things forward. They find fulfillment and personal growth in their work. And this motivation leads to higher levels of productivity because they're going to give discretionary effort, right? A little bit more than is absolutely required of the job. And every little bit more you can motivate people to give, the more productive your workforce will be. Number 2 is improved focus and energy. When people are engaged at work, they are more focused and they have more energy. Why? Because they're doing work that feeds their soul, that is energizing to them instead of energy depleting. I often liken this to writing with your non-dominant hand, right? When we're engaged, it's like you're writing with your dominant hand. You're not really thinking about it. You're just doing the work and you hit flow. But when you are doing work that drains you, it's like trying to write with your non-dominant hand. It's frustrating. You feel stupid. You feel slow. And all these things mount up to, number one, make you less productive, but number two, put you in a really bad mood. And there's less energy to put toward the work. The third thing is enhanced job satisfaction. When people feel more engaged, they like their work better, They are more likely to do better work and more of it. They are less likely to sit around and complain about whatever's going on and actually get the job done. They feel more of a sense of accomplishment. And so all of this contributes to greater productivity. Number four, increased innovation and creativity. When people are engaged and they feel safe, and those things really go hand in hand, when those two things happen, people are not only more productive in the work that they're doing, but they're thinking about how could I do this work more efficiently? How could I do this better? What new products and services could we take to market? What problems can I solve? What problems do I even see that I think I can solve? So engagement really leads to this creative problem solving, but also innovation inside and outside the organization. And then finally, if you're worried about productivity right now, focus on engagement, because engagement leads to lower absenteeism and lower turnover. The more engaged your employees are, the more likely they're going to show up at work, the more likely they're going to get work done while they're there, the more likely they're going to innovate. And they can't do any of that if they are burnt out, if they're calling in sick, if they're taking mental health days. I'm not saying to cancel PTO and mental health days. Those things are important, but are you creating an environment where your employees can really thrive, where they can really see themselves doing their best work, where they want to come to work every day, and it doesn't feel like a struggle to come in, to be there, to stay there, and to put forth the effort? And all of this comes down to the leader. How are you leading? Are you leading inclusively? I'm really curious to see how many of you have noticed, this is purely anecdotal evidence, this isn't hard data, but how many of you have noticed lower productivity in the last 3 to 6 months in your workplace than maybe you were seeing a year ago or 2 years ago? And if so, what do you think is behind that? Do you think people are doing less work? Do you think they're getting paid more for the same work? Do you think they're less engaged? Do you think they're just tired? What's going on? Let me know in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I would also like to share with you, and I'm not seeing any comments yet, but let me know, hashtag live or hashtag replay, when you're watching this. And I would also like to let you know that if you are struggling with employee engagement or retention, if you would like to keep your employees and keep them engaged in what is now historically low unemployment, historically low productivity, sadly, but more importantly, historically low unemployment, which means it's going to be harder and take longer and cost more to find people if your current employees leave. If you're looking for strategies to help with that, contact me at workwithlaal.com. This will put you right on my calendar, and you can pick a time that works for you, and we can actually talk about what is it that you're seeing in your workplace, where would you like to be, and what are some strategies to close that gap. I really do want to hear from you about how I could help, or what you've tried in the past and what's not working and what is working. How can we help you get to where you need to be in terms of employee retention, engagement, and productivity, so you can meet your goals as an organization or as the leader of your department? Because right now, as we're kind of sort of on the precipice of what people are calling a slowdown, or maybe using some harsher language about the economy right now is the time to invest in your employees, to invest in your leaders, to invest in employee engagement, so that you can maintain your productivity, outperform your competitors, retain your employees, attract some key talent, maybe away from some of your competitors. Right now is the time. And the people who get this right, the organizations who get this right, are the ones who are going to win in this economic cycle. So that's all I have for you for this week. Be sure to join me on Thursday for Including You. That's live at noon Eastern on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. My guest will be my friend, my client, and just an outstanding human being, Dana Becton from Centera Healthcare. She's phenomenal. She's the Chief Diversity Officer there, and we're going to be talking about health equity and her experience at Centera, working with the community. It's a fantastic interview. I can't wait to share it with you. Again, that'll be live at noon Eastern on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, right here, wherever you're watching this. And then if you miss it, or if you prefer audio podcasts, you want to be sure to subscribe to Living Corporate. It's available wherever you get your podcasts, and we are the Friday show in the Living Corporate podcast series. So be sure to join us there. I'm trying to keep these to 15 minutes. That's my time. I want to thank you all for being a part of this today. Be sure and let me know in the comments, what do you think about productivity right now? What do you think's behind the change? And what are you planning to do about it? All right, that's all for now. Have a great week. I'll see you next week for Lead at Any Level Live.